Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Hart, and today I'll be breaking down the Thursday night football game here between the Jaguars and Saints, talking through some of my favorite plays, some core plays for you guys, and building out a potential lineup for you guys to play for tomorrow night's contest. So, going to be uploading this Thursday morning. I'm recording this Wednesday night. So, some of this news will change. So, make sure to stay updated with me on Twitter at HartDFS. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Do appreciate all the support. And let's jump right into this $1 million up top the first place. So, we'll be talking through some people to help us get different to potentially take down this $1 million to first. So, hopping on to the DraftKings Sportsbook here, we have the Jags Saints. Obviously, with these division games happening, the game totals are going to start dropping like flies here. 1 point spread, game total is 40. So, not the best, not the worst, as we can see here. Heading to this Sunday, not to jump ahead, but 37 game total between the Falcons and Bucks. That is disgusting. But jumping over to the Jaguars side here, the big news here for them is obviously Trevor Lawrence is questionable. Obviously, massive, massive news because it really, really hurts this team if he's out, and we had to look to CJ Beathard, beat hard, trash hard, just absolute garbage. Hopefully Trevor Lawrence plays. But yeah, that is the big news there for the Jacksonville side. For quarterback, for wide receiver, Zay Jones is out. We can look to some value there. And that is really it for the Jacksonville Jaguars side, at least for the DFS side. I know there might be some potential injuries on the offensive line or possibly even the defensive side of things. But in terms of the DFS being able to pick some people here and throw them in the lineup, that's the news there. For the New Orleans side, same thing, nothing too huge. Jamal Williams is questionable. Obviously, if he's back, it does throw a wrinkle into things, especially when they get to the goal line there for the Saints. We'll talk through that. Juwan Johnson is out, so we could look to some tight end value there. But really, otherwise, that's really it for the Saints side of things. So jumping back to the Jacksonville side, let's get into the snap count here for the Jaguars. So as you can see here for the running back situation, Travis Etienne has been fantastic. As you can see, 85% of the snaps, 83, and then 80. So 80% or more the past 3 weeks. I do expect that number to drop down maybe 5%, something around there, but still it's his backfield to lose. Tank Bixby will get mixed in a little bit, as you guys can see. 8 snaps, 13, 17, nothing too crazy, but his snaps have been going up the past 3 weeks there. Moving on to the wide receiver situation, obviously there is no Zay Jones. He's a big part of the offense. So as we can see here in this last game, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, they're going to be playing probably about 80% of the snaps. They're obviously wide receiver 1 and 2. However you want to number them, they're both wide receiver 1 essentially. Then moving on to the wide receiver 3 situation here, we have Tim Jones, Jamal Agnew, and Elijah Cooks, who did see some snaps there, about 10 in that last game, who did get added to the mix. So they will run, 3 different guys out there for the third wide receiver spot, but it's nothing too crazy, and none of them are really getting involved at all besides Jamal Agnew, which was pretty much just one game. Otherwise, I don't think a single one of them got a target that last game. So we'll talk about that there in a second. And then tight end situation, they are running 3 tight ends out there, but obviously Evan Ingram going to be the main majority guy there when it comes to running routes and catching the passes, getting targets. Luke Farrell, Benton Strange, they will see some targets, maybe 1 to 2 at most. We saw Benton Strange see, I think it was 2 targets. He caught one for a touchdown in the red zone, and both targets came in the red zone. So we can talk about that here in a second. But yeah, they'll mix 3, but mostly Luke Farrell and Brenton Strange are the pass blockers or run blockers, I should say. Moving on to the Saints side here. Similar situation. It's Alvin Kamara's backfield to lose. As I mentioned, there might be Jamal Williams. So we'll talk about that here in a second. But right now, it's pretty much Alvin Kamara. As you can see, about 75, 80% or more of the snaps. Expect the same here in this game. Kendre Miller, 36 and 22% of the snaps. So as you can see, he's getting about a fourth of the snap share right now. Don't expect anything crazy, about the same for this game tonight. Chris Olave, obviously wide receiver 1. Michael Thomas, wide receiver 2. They're going to see 80% of more of the snaps. Wide receiver 3 is Rashid Shaheed. He saw 76% of the snaps. He's kind of fluctuating in terms of the snap count there. Keith Kirkwood is dropping down a bit, so keep that in mind. But Keith Kirkwood is seeing some plays there, 19, 17, and 15 the past 3 weeks. And they did mix in some Lynn Bowden Jr. there, but that's nothing too crazy. A little, basically 10 snaps or less. Not getting heavily involved at all either. I don't even know if he's gotten a target. Tight end situation, they are mixing Taysom Hill in there a decent amount. Obviously, he's a gadget guy. They'll run to him. They'll have a few pass plays for him. He's always a threat to kind of cuck you in your lineup when you get to the red zone, just because they do like to do some random stuff with him when they get there. So he's always in play. As you can see here, he's actually playing a decent amount of snaps: 33, 28, and 49. So we can talk about him. Foster Moreau will be the main tight end though, with there being no Juwan Johnson. So obviously Foster Moreau will be the main, kind of the pass catching tight end. Taysom Hill more of the gadget guy, but they do both get played. And then Jimmy Graham, his snaps are really plummeted, as you can see. Week 4 he played 42%. Obviously there's no Foster Moreau there, but now that Foster Moreau is back, he dropped down to 27 in week 5 and then 14 snaps in week 6. So he is very, very risky, but he's getting some snaps. He's always a red zone target. You can look to him if you want to get super contrarian, but that's kind of the landscape of the two teams right now. So in terms of Jacksonville here, obviously we have ETN 15.3K. Looks really, really good. Overall, New Orleans is actually a pretty solid defense if you haven't been paying attention. Over the years, let's say the past 20 years, New Orleans has always been a really, really solid defensive team. Obviously, they're a really good team overall when they had Drew Brees, but now they don't. They're more of a random team. They're really just more, it really depends on if their defense can keep them in it. And if they can, then the offense, it really just depends on if they can score. But as we can see here, Travis Etienne, especially the past 2 games, has been fantastic. But it's just the amount of opportunities. As you can see, since week 3, 19 rushing attempts, he had 5 targets. Week 4, 20 rushing attempts, 3 targets. Week 5, 26 rushing attempts, 5 targets. And week 6, last week, 18 rushing attempts and 3 targets. So he's seen 20 or more attempts, rushing plus targets, passing the past, 4 weeks straight. So really, really like him. He's a really, really solid option, especially if there's no Trevor Lawrence. They're going to have to rely on the run game. So it'd make, Travis Etienne even more viable. Same thing with Tank Bigsby. It'd make him a solid value play down there, 3,300 if there's no CJ, or excuse me, if there's no Lawrence. Now, if there is Lawrence, I don't know if I'd get to Tank if you're trying to be contrarian. Don't love the price tag. It's just more of a contrarian play. Maybe Travis Etienne gets hurt. Maybe he, breaks off a long run and they throw in Tank Bigsby when they get to their goal line just to give Travis Etienne a breather. Tank runs in for a touchdown. You can always, try to game script it that way. But more so, I don't think I'm going to get to Tank as of right now, 3,300, unless we get that news that Trevor Lawrence might be out or is out. But yeah, Etienne looks like a great captain to play. I mean, he has the upside there in the passing game. He has upside there in the rushing game. As you can see, back-to-back games with 2 touchdowns each. I expect that touchdown variance to drop, but still, he is a workhorse right now. Bell cow back. So I really, really like Travis Etienne, whether that's in the flex or in the captain spot. Trevor Lawrence, I know he really hasn't flashed some upside this season. He's gotten really unlucky when it comes down to just touchdown variance. There's a few games where there's multiple times where guys were like a half inch out of catching a touchdown, and it's really hurt his numbers. But he's a guy; he has enough weapons to be in that captain spot. So I do really like Lawrence, especially if he's gonna have that questionable tag. If he does play, I do think he'll keep some of his ownership lower than it should be. But yeah, I think he's a really, really solid captain play, really, really strong flex play. But I think as of right now, I'd rather play him the captain spot just because I don't think a lot of people will go that way. Just because he really doesn't flash too high of a ceiling. But I mean, he's throwing 30 or more attempts pretty much every single game. He does have that upside to throw for 300 plus yards and multiple touchdowns. It just hasn't happened yet, but it can, and we know it can. So I do really like him in the captain spot for this game tomorrow, even though New Orleans is a tough defense. Calvin Ridley, obviously, if Trevor Lawrence is out, you can play CJ. Don't love him. Don't love his price tag there at 8,600, but still, I guess he's playable. I don't know if I'd do it. It'd probably be more so of an ownership play there. Like if he's gonna be super loaned, wouldn't mind getting to him in the flex, but still, it's not the best price tag to get him at 8,600. Pretty gross there. Being more expensive than Calvin Ridley. But Calvin Ridley, in terms of the wide receivers, he's seen a healthy amount of targets. It's just more a boom or bust, as you can see. 8 targets, only caught 4 for 30 yards. Right now, it's pretty much been the Christian Kirk show, as you can see here. Just in terms of fantasy score, he's been just way more consistent the past few games compared to Christian or Calvin Ridley. So if you want to go the safe route, I'd say Christian Kirk. If you want to go the more boom or bust play, Calvin Ridley. And once again, it really comes down to ownership. I like both. It's really just an ownership play for me, but they're both viable for captain. They obviously are getting peppered with targets, and they both have really, really good upside. So, as I said, Calvin Ridley more of the boomer bust option in the captain spot. Christian Kirk, I'd say he's a little bit more safe in the flex spot, but still he could be a really, really solid captain's play. So really like both of them. Obviously, if I had to choose, I'd probably say Ridley, but once again, it really comes down to ownership for me there. Who's ever a little bit lower owned, I like him more than the other one, but still I like both of them. I'd play both of them in the same lineup together. Evan Ingram, 5,800 is a pretty cheap price tag for a guy who, as you can see, pretty much 8 targets the past 5-6 games in a row. 5,800, that's just it seems very cheap for a guy who's seen 8 targets every single game, who's playing a good amount of snaps. I mean, he's their main tight end. They're not going to sub him out for someone else. So I think that's just way too cheap as of right now for Evan Ingram there. We know he does have huge playability. So right now I'm gonna throw him in there as one of the core plays. Kickers are always viable. 4,800. Don't love that price tag there, even though McManus has shown some upside. It's just more so they just haven't been the best in the red zone, which has allowed McManus to kick more field goals. But still, he's viable. I don't love it there at that price tag. Same with the defense. Defense is always viable. You really need a defensive touchdown or to be a super low scoring game, multiple sacks, couple fumble recovers, couple interceptions for them to be viable. If you're not going to get that defensive touchdown, otherwise, I don't know if I'd go there. It's really just an ownership play. Like if they're going to be like 15% or less, you can always go there because you do start off with those points there. And if it keeps it a lower scoring game, they're going to they're going to put you in a solid spot. As I mentioned, take Tank Bigsby, more of a play here if you want to be super contrarian. If there's Trevor Lawrence, now if there's not Trevor Lawrence, you could definitely look to Tank because they will be relying on the run game more, and they'll look to give to Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby. So that's kind of the thought process there. And then I did mention the kind of the value plays for Jacksonville. Brenton Strange, as we saw, kind of the tight end 2 last week. 2 of his targets came in the red zone. He caught one of them for a touchdown. Did see another target kind of in the, not in the red zone. But I wouldn't chase. It's more so just a Hail Mary play here at $1,000. Hasn't been involved at all, but he will be out there. It's just one of those things that don't really look his way. If you're gonna take a shot on one of these like cheap value guys, one of these like Hail Mary guys, I'd say it'd be Jamal Agnew. He's more of a gadget guy. He's a special teams guy. He's really fast. He can return kickoffs, punt returns. He's more sort of a kickoff returner. But as you can see, in week 3, they did use him. 5 targets, he caught 4 for 49 yards. Otherwise, the past 2 weeks, they have used him, but he hasn't seen any targets. So he's always a threat. Super cheap. It's just one of those things. You're really asking to get a 0 unless, for some reason he gets targeted in this game. And that's really it. Elijah Cooks, the third guy there, saw some run in week 6 with Jose Jones. I'm assuming he'll see some snaps as well, but still, it's very gross going to those guys. Excuse me. Moving on to the Saints side here. Obviously, Alvin Kamara been a main part of this offense. As you can see, he's been an absolute workhorse. Has absolutely massive upside there with the receiving game. 14 targets the first week he's back. Then 3 against New England. Obviously, they blew him out. Didn't need much of him. They did run him 22 times, which is wild to see. And then Houston, close game, ran him 19 times. Hasn't been super efficient running the ball, but still 8 targets, caught 7 for 36. So he just has a very safe floor, massive ceiling with that upside there. Love him at his price tag of 10-4. Huge part of this offense. Really like him. Obviously, he's probably going to be the most popular play of the slates, but for good reason. Chris Olave, another one of those boomer bust guys. He is getting peppered with targets. It really just depends on if they're going to try to game plan to keep him out of the game or into the game, in terms of the Jacksonville defense. But still, I like him. Boomer bust guy. Very solid captain play. He's kind of like a Calvin Ridley play. Like they'll probably get around 10 targets. It really just depends on if they can catch that like big pass downfield. If they can, then they should be really solid to be in the winning lineup. Derek Carr, 8,800. He's more of, I'd say, just like he's another one of those guys who's like a boomer bust play. As you can see, his best game of the season was last week. Threw for 353 yards, only 1 touchdown. Wasn't super efficient, but still 20 fantasy points. Before that, 15. And then, as you can see, just all over the place. So very risky. 8,800. I don't think it's a necessity to play him, which I feel like most of the shutdown slates, you're always going to want to look to either one of the QBs. But I say right now, Derek Carr is playing like one of the worst QBs, but we know he has solid upside. As you can see that last game, he has upside. It just he's just all over the place in terms of play. So that makes him risky at that price tag. So once again, it really comes down to ownership for me now. Like if Derek Carr is going to be 25%, 20%, maybe sub 20% ownership, I'm gonna have some interest there because we know he has upside. Right now, he's more of a flex play. I think he does have enough upside to be a captain play, but he's super, super risky overall. Michael Thomas, 7,000. He's actually been pretty consistent. Nothing too crazy. We know, slant boy. He's going to get those slants. He's going to get those short to intermediate throws. Nothing crazy downfield unless he breaks off a tackle. So he's just more one of those, super safe, super consistent. You really need like a big run, a touchdown from him. He hasn't gotten one yet, so I wouldn't be surprised if he gets one tonight. That's really what you need and hope for there at 7,000. He's getting the targets. It's just one of the things you need, like a big run or a touchdown to kind of help you there in terms of his fancy score, because otherwise it's pretty limited. But I'd say he is, I don't know if he's captain play for me. He's like fringe captain play. I'd say more so in the flex. He's just a solid option at 7,000. Taysom Hill, it's a pretty steep price tag for a guy who, as you can see, before week 6, he was out there. He was playing. It just, it's one of those things. He's just not really involved. It really comes down to, can he fall in the end zone for you? If he can, I don't mind getting contrarian and playing him at 6,200. I'm sure he'll have some ownership, but still, it's one of those things. You really need him to get a touchdown or throw for a touchdown to help help him be viable. Otherwise, that's a hefty price tag to play for a guy who's 6,200 and has just been used in maybe 4 to 8 gadget plays a game. So yeah, really touchdown dependent there for Taysom Hill. Once again, just more so of an ownership play. Like if no one's gonna play him, I don't mind getting to him and being contrarian there. Saints defense 5,400. Obviously, if there's no CJ, I'm assuming they're going to be pretty popular. I'm going to go ahead and fade, as I always say. With defenses, you really need the game to be super low scoring, few turnovers, or you need them to score defensive touchdown. But 5,400 for a defense, especially if there is Trevor Lawrence, it's even if they are like 5% owned, don't think I can get there. Groupie, pretty expensive there, 5,200 for a kicker. I mean, it's like one of those things. I just don't think this 5K ownership range will have much ownership just because, you have Evan Ingram there who's seen 8 targets a game, massive ability, or massive big playability, massive upside. Or it's like, why would you not play him when, the Saints in, groupier there, a little bit cheaper, but it's like still. I'd rather go to Evan Ingram. So maybe if there's like low ownership in this 5K range, I don't mind going to them. But right now, I don't think there's really a need to when Evan Ingram's there at 5,800. Rashid Shaheed, 5,000. Don't love the price tag. It's just more so, do you think he's going to have a big catch? If you do, he's seen solid targets 7, 2, and 6. It's just one of those things. He's a very boom or bust play. It just comes down to, can he catch that deep ball? If he can, I don't know if he's captain play for me. I'd say he's more so of a flex. Don't love the price tag, but he's definitely playable. As I mentioned, Jamal Williams, if he's in, I would assume 10, 15 snaps at most. They'd probably most of them would probably come in the red zone. So he's definitely playable at 4,200. It's just very risky. Obviously, if he's out, no need to get to him. Foster Moreau, 3,200. Saw 4 targets last game. It's just one of those things. 3,200 is more so just like a shoulder shrug play. Like you throw him in there, he'll see maybe a red zone target or two. He'll see a couple over the middle of the field. That's really it. No real strong interest there for me. Kendre Miller, it's just one of those, they used him a ton in the New England game just because they were up so much, 34-0. Otherwise, they really haven't been using him much. It's pretty much been the Alvin Kamara show. They've been mixing in some Taysom Hill, so he's just more so of an outlier play there at 1,800. Pretty cheap, but still, he's just not getting heavily involved in this game. So more so just a contrarian play. Same thing with Jimmy Graham, just a cheap contrarian play, more so just a Hail Mary shot. And that's really it. With both these offenses, it's pretty much coming from like 3-4 main guys. Obviously for Jacksonville, it's, Travis Etienne, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, and it's Evan Ingram, and obviously, Trevor Lawrence. And then for New Orleans, it's Alvin Kamara, Olave, Michael Thomas, Derek Carr. It's like not many options outside of that. All the other options outside of those people are either too expensive to want to get to, or they're just very boomer bust. So there's a lot of boomer bust options, as you guys have heard me talk about over the course of this video. To help you get contrarian. One of them gets a touchdown. That's all you really need on a slate like this. On a showdown slate, is one of those guys to have one catch, fall in the end zone, get that 6 point touchdown, score. Maybe they have one or two more catches, or maybe that's all you really need is 7, 8, 9 points from that guy falling in the end zone to help you take down the $1 million first. So that is the breakdown in terms of building out this lineup. I do as of right now. Let's just assume Trevor Lawrence is in. Going to throw him in there. I do like his upside there as a captain play. Obviously, it's going to be hard not to get to Kamara just because of the massive upside there with the rushing ability, with the passing or pass catching ability. Let's get one more pass catcher for Trevor Lawrence since he's captain. Excuse me. As I mentioned, it's going to come down to ownership, but let's just go with Calvin Ridley as of right now. I do want to get to at least one more Saints guy there. So obviously, if we have Trevor Lawrence there, it's either going to be because of game script rise, they go off. Trevor Lawrence goes off, throws for multiple touchdowns, 300 plus yards, or it's one of those things where Alvin Kamara goes off, which you know he can still go off, and Trevor Lawrence can still be the most viable captain. But if that happens, Alvin Kamara goes off. Let's say they'd probably have another guy who has a pretty solid game. Whether you want to go to Foster Moreau there, cheap option, or if you want to go to like Shaheed here, don't mind it. 5,000, big boomer bust guy, big playability. Leaves you 6,000 left over. At that point, we can fit in a decent amount of people, as you can see. Let's go with hmm. I mean, you can go with one of the kickers. So if you think Trevor Lawrence is going to go off, I wouldn't mind getting into McManus there, 4,800. 1,200 left over allows you to get contrarian. You have Trevor Lawrence, captain spot. You have two of his pass catchers, Ingram and Calvin Ridley. You have Kamara on the other side, who's a huge part of that offense. Shaheed, who's got the big playability, and then McManus to kind of solidify that offensive stack there for Jacksonville. So I don't mind that. In terms of core plays, right now it's going to be Lawrence, Ingram, Kamara, and Ridley for me. Obviously, that's not very contrarian at all. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of options on the slate for you guys to get contrarian in terms of under 3,000, even in that 5,000 range. As I mentioned, I'd say this 5,000 range and below is going to be one of those where you can get very, very different, very, very contrarian. Like as I said, I do think Evan Ingram is going to pull a lot of ownership in that below 6K range, just because there's not a ton of options. As I mentioned, Ingram's seeing 8 targets a game, 5,800. That's very, very cheap. The other people with him, the Saints defense, 5,400, which, they're pretty solid. They're always viable, but still, if Trevor Lawrence plays, don't love that price tag. Groupie, don't love 5,200 for him. Shaheed, very, very boomer bust, 5,000, not the best price tag. McManus, same thing, 4,800 for a kicker. Doesn't feel great. Below that, Jaguars, 3,800. It's like, Moreau, 3,200, Bigsby, 2,200, Miller, 1,800. You just get all these very, very boomer bust guys. It allows you to get contrarian, but you don't feel great about it. So there's a lot of options to get different tomorrow. I don't know if you need to, unless you're really, really trying to go for that solo to first, $1 million to first. But as of right now, these are kind of the core plays I'm liking for tonight's game. As I mentioned, recording this Wednesday night, throwing it up Thursday morning. So we'll probably get news on Jamal Williams. We'll probably get news on Trevor Lawrence, probably midday today when you guys are watching this. So make sure to check out Twitter. Make sure to stay updated just to know if Lawrence is in, Jamal Williams is in, because it will throw some wrinkles into the game, as I mentioned throughout this video. So if you guys hit that like button, do really appreciate it. I'll see you guys in the core video for the Sunday main slate. Peace.